Okay, this is the lecture on theater as a business or theater business. I mainly put into this one what I think is interesting, as I try to with all of these, because these are just kind of scratching the surface as an introduction to all of your experiences in this class as we look at the different elements of theater. This one is going into the theater as a business. What I have here is a organizational chart. No matter what your career path may be for you or where you may end up in your career, you will work with a group of people, and there will be, should be, a layout of hierarchy and who's in charge of who and who does what. That's kind of what a chart is, or organizational chart. It sort of tells you how things are within a company. This is a typical one for a theater, whether it's professional, non-professional, commercial, etc. The big difference is typically in our different types of theater, some will be by way of board of directors that are volunteers, some will be by way of a board of directors that may be paid, like stockholders, and then some may be a sole proprietor or an owner, or an executive producer who is more or less, or president who is in charge of everything. And we'll break those down, but that's what this chart is for. So let me take you back into our, let's see, here we are. Okay, so theater as a business. It's important to know that there are two basic categories of the activity of theater business. One is to be a producing theater, and the other is to be a presenting theater. Most theaters that we experience in our artistic world are what we call producing theaters. A producing theater means that theater has the staff, the funds, and the wherewithal to create and put together their own productions and their own shows. That's how we do it here at TAMUK Theater. It is also how your local community theater probably does it. It's also how a lot of your Broadway houses and your professional theaters also do it. And then you have something called a presenting house or presenting theater. And these are theater spaces. Usually they're places. It's usually a theater has a establishment or a building that is a theater, and they bring in or they book live shows to come in and perform. So it's important to know the difference between a producing house and a presenting house. What we teach and practice in our activity of theater is producing theater. We teach how to produce and create all theater. Anybody with a stack of cash and a place can hire in a professional group to come in and perform, and they can do a ticket split, or they can buy them out, and or they can invest and make that money off of them doing that. A producing theater can have the capability of presenting, but typically a presenting theater has to do a whole lot of things in order to produce their own shows. Producing theater has staff, producing theater has other working parts, a scene shop, people who are a resident design program, people that they're able to bring in, and funds to do that. Okay, so we try to keep it in big categories. Our three main categories that we approach this in is commercial for-profit theater, professional non-profit theater, and amateur non-profit theater. And typically when we think theater and theater business, we think Broadway. Even when I was in high school doing theater, people said, "Oh, so you're going to be on Broadway one day." No, probably not. Most actors that are some of your most amazing professional actors never do grace a Broadway stage. Broadway falls more into that commercial bracket, but typically can also have nonprofit entities that are involved in that as well. So commercial for-profit is typically presenting and or producing houses that are there to make money. They have investors. It's like if you wanted to open a tennis shoe factory, you want to get people to get money to you, or you want to borrow money, or you have a way of getting money, and typically those are investors. Even if a bank gives you a loan, that's kind of like an investment because you do have to pay that loan back. So you're getting money to produce a company, to produce work, to make money, just like if you wanted to make money off your tennis shoe factory, you are making money off of your theater. Now, that is not all professional theater, and not all professional theater is commercial. The next one is professional nonprofit. Nonprofit means that it does the same thing as commercial. It presents or produces high quality theater, but it can be tax exempt, and typically they're artistically driven. What I mean by that is there are two factions of theater. There's that commercial theater out there that caters more to our popular culture, and then we have professional entities that a lot will find in our regional theater circuits, and other small profit theater circuits that are artistically driven. They're seeking out new works, things that are satisfying to the artistic culture. But again, even those larger theaters will have those plays and musicals that are going to have to sell tickets and make money. You have to make money to continue to work. So that's professional nonprofit. And then amateur nonprofit is, this is theater that is there to present and or produce with non-professional idea in mind, meaning that it typically is all driven by volunteer or partly. A lot of it involves the local community and not bringing in professionals or outside entities, and or it also includes educational theater like our university theater here at TAMUK. While I have seen some of the best theater in my life in amateur work, these are folks that typically have day jobs. They have other things going on in their life, and it's usually evening rehearsals, and they do not get paid for what they do. Now, when we talk about the word professional, it does not necessarily always mean quality, because again, some non-professionals do some pretty phenomenal work on stage. The idea of professional means to be paid for the work that sustains the artist, meaning if you do paintings and you get paid $10 a painting on the weekend and you do like 6, that is not money that is your living. So it's the money you're paid for your work that's your living. Broadway actors can make up to $1,300 a week starting and on up, and the industry pay for professional directors and actors throughout the country through unions and everything is an amount that is expected to be sustainable, and that's where that comes from. And then of course then you can make the zillions that some of these other artists get to the point of making. Okay, so let's go into nonprofit. Now this is part 1, so this will do a couple of parts so it makes sense. So let's look at what nonprofit means. A nonprofit is typically comes by way of the fact that it is not a professional entity, and typically nonprofit, you are a nonprofit when you're in the tax code of what's called a 501c3. I'm going to use Texas as our example, but that we kind of have an idea of how this works. But a nonprofit 501c3 is a company that has a tax code where they are considered tax exempt, means they do not have to pay taxes on goods and services and can be a tax write-off. Now, there's not a huge, massive difference I'm going to show you between for-profits and non-profits. But if you are a nonprofit entity, you don't have to pay taxes, and people get to write off their donations when they donate to you. Now, what's great about that is it benefits the nonprofit because I get the donation, but it also benefits those that have the money to donate. They get to write that off. So the more that people with wealth and money can write off, the less of a tax burden or tax bill they have. How do they alleviate that? By donating it to charities. And that's always a great thing because it makes them look good. They get the press for it, and they get to write it off. What's good for the nonprofit is they get that couple of million and they get to continue to survive. So when you're opening a theater company, you do have to think about, do I want to go down the for-profit lane or the nonprofit lane? So we're in Texas. We'll just stay in Texas. So let's define what makes a nonprofit in the state of Texas. Texas is a right-to-work state. There's 12 or 13 I think, states that are what's called right-to-work states, meaning you do not have to be part of a union to take part in the professional end of it. So there are a lot of nonprofits that are also professional theaters, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So what makes a nonprofit, mainly in Texas, but what typically, these are pretty generic rules for most of these. An organization must be run by volunteers. The volunteers are under the construct of being a board of directors. So that means if you're on a board of directors for a nonprofit, you're not getting paid, you can't get paid. There must be at least 3 board of directors in Texas to be a functioning nonprofit board. All funds, this is very important, all funds, expenses, and income must be documented and must go back into the organization. Now, if you have a company or business, yes, you should be tracking every dime, every penny. if you're a nonprofit organization, by law, you have to track every dime, every penny. Why? Because you benefit from tax exemption. So what does that mean? That means any money that you make on top of what it takes to maintain your organization must go back into the company. So yes, you can be a CEO of a nonprofit organization and have a really good salary. You can make about 6 figures a year, some more, as long as it's in the bylaws, as long as it's accounted for. So your overhead is the money that it takes to run your business, your bills, your employee salaries, things like that. And nonprofits have these. They can be as large as your church, which is a nonprofit, Lighthouse for the Blind, Susan G. Komen. A lot of charities are all nonprofits because they get those benefits. Entertainment functions like theater companies are also nonprofits on a big chunk of them. So basically all nonprofit means is all the profits, because nonprofits make profits, all the nonprofits have to go back into the company. And every dime must be accounted for. Can the executive director get a raise? Yes. It just has to be accounted for and laid into the bylaws. Next, organization must have a clear set of rules and guidelines as to how they operate. Those are called bylaws. Some call it also the Constitution. Next, organizations must have a clear laid out description of officers, and then they must also list how they meet and create their quorums. A quorum is a group of board members that are required to be at meetings to do business. If you're a volunteer running a company, then you're not going to make any money if you do something correct or incorrect with the organization. So the concept is you won't have a conflict of interest. You're doing it out of the goodness of your heart or the donation of your time and labor and maybe money to run an organization. That is a way that we try to keep things honest and not have corruption, even though it can happen. But a quorum means if you have 12 people on your board of directors, and every month when you meet, you may not always have those 12 people. A quorum is how many people are required to be there. So if your quorum says we have 7, that means if you have 6 people show up for your monthly board meeting to conduct business, then you have to stop, because you have to have 7 to make a quorum. Most nonprofit organizations have a staff that's paid. Your highest staff member, your executive director, your highest staff person there, even though they may have a good salary and they're running everything, they have to answer to the volunteer board. These board members are covered by board and officers insurance, and if you ever get on a board, it's important to know that you have that insurance, because if you don't, volunteer board of directors can get in a lot of trouble if there is an issue or something that is illegal that goes down with the company. So I'm going to kind of stop here with the board of directors and pick up with how a nonprofit is going to behave and how they can get started. So this will conclude part 1 of theater as a business. So take these notes as you go along. I'll also be attaching another paper that has a couple of videos about some of the business aspects of running a theater. All right, so let's conclude there, and